Thank you again, Arlindo, for inviting me to diving talks and to allow me to talk. Thankfully, I get a little bit more than 4 minutes today. Many of the people in the audience, the speakers that have shared with us the incredible things they've been doing, have one thing in common with myself. They all started at the beginning. Now, over 35 years, I've been extremely lucky, and the key word here is lucky, to be in the right place at the right time for doors to open to give me opportunity to pursue my passion and my career as a diver. And really what I wanted to cover today was that is possible for any of you, from a non-diver who takes those first steps with snorkeling, then an open water course, which was my beginnings, to any person that has an interest in the ocean or any underwater environment. So the progress to do that is, first of all, to find your passion. And we've seen from all these talks over yesterday and today that every one of these people that's standing up and presenting to you is fiercely passionate. Passionate about what they do, passionate about the environment that they do it in, and passionate about protecting it. For me, I am a troglodyte. I'm meant to live underground. They made me do an interview in the sun earlier, and it was awful. I wanted to crawl back under my stone. So my passion has always been the underground. That began from a background of dry caving, and eventually in dry caving, you follow the passage, you come to a hole. You learn to use ropes to descend the hole. You come to a wall, you learn to climb the wall. You come to water, you inflate a boat you've taken with you and travel in that subterranean river. And eventually the river meets the ceiling, the realm of the cave diver. I became a cave diver a little bit by accident. I was working in a camping shop on the weekends while I was at college. Somebody came into the shop, said, "Can we put this poster up to advertise this talk?" And it was a talk by a person called Martin Farr. And Martin Farr wrote the Bible of cave diving, The Darkness Beckons. So I greedily devoured the whole of that first edition of the book after seeing his talk and said, I want to do that. And this is why I want to do it. We were looking at this photo on the left on the bus this morning. This isn't a cave, it's a mine. But as Jojo said yesterday, diving in mines is like wreck diving and cave diving combined, the industrial archaeology with the geology. What's incredible about this, which is an opal mine in Slovakia, is the cobwebs at the top left are not soft, they are rock. So the carboniferous water that makes your lips tingle because it's like fizzy water, because it's so infused with carbon dioxide, dissolves away all the other rock and leaves behind the stronger rock in these cobweb formations. A picture on the right-hand side shows the sheer scale of it. People have this idea that cave diving is small, tight, confined spaces with no visibility. It can be, but it can also be like this incredible spring in Croatia. And this is what inspired me to move onwards. Sometimes it is small, horrible, damp. This is really, I suppose, bordering on insanity. It's taking Kirk's discipline of free diving to cave dive. Now, it's not very long. There's a big thick rope. You take a breath, you pull yourself through this flooded section, and beyond is more magical dry cave to explore. But what's interesting is Jared's picture at the beginning of his talk today of Balcom and Powell diving C.B. Gorman's standard dress in Wookey Hole. This is where the water in Wookey Hole comes from, Swilden's Hole on the mountain. And they spent 20 years trying to get through this flooded section that's only a meter long with homemade diving equipment and bicycle pumps. Today it can be free dived. So the exploration continues. Second, I had to find my vocation, what I wanted to do as a job. That initial PADI open water course led on to becoming an instructor. That inspired me even more because I started to enjoy sharing my love, educating as much as the diving in itself. But it led on to me being heavily involved with scientific diving. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an academic, I'm just a diver. But I got the opportunity to manage, to run, and to organize the safety of scientific diving teams. Picture on the left, I've just been down to 50 meters to pick up a fire hose that we leave on the seabed overnight. You bring it back up the shot line to 30 meters, and hanging in the water is an impeller driven by a hydraulic pump. Once it's fired up, it sends water down the fire hose, round a U-tube and creates suction, so water dredge, enabling archaeological excavation of site. And by that method, we found this spear in the middle picture. It's not a fighting spear, it's a spear from a sculpture. Now, if you're ever lucky enough to visit the Museum of Archaeology in Athens and go for a coffee in the outdoor cafeteria, there are 3 life-size marble horses and an 8-foot-high marble Hercules. It's believed that they were accompanied by a huge wooden and metal chariot, but there should have been 4 horses. One of them is missing on the seabed because the steamship that excavated the size picked up boulders, dragged them out of the way, dropped them in deep water to excavate underneath for artifacts such as this spear and the legendary Antikythera mechanism. One of those boulders is the horse, and we'll come back to that later. But then you go to this extent that what you see in the photo here is the base of a handmade wicker basket made from tree roots from a shipwreck in 1495 that's been underwater for over 500 years. Incredibly delicate artifacts. The picture on the right is from that site. The wreck is called the Gribshunden or Griffin Hound. The front of that ship has a dragon with a human head in its mouth. You imagine the superstitious people of the 1490s in a battle against such a ship with the human head in the mouth of the dragon approaching and firing its cannons. Now, this is actually a still from a 6-week photogrammetrical model. And what we do now, because archaeology by its very nature, especially underwater or maritime archaeology, destroys the site, no matter how careful you are. So every day before the excavation begins, we make a several hundred or thousand photo model, and then we start the work the next day again. So what you actually see as you play that from 6 weeks of expedition is the artifacts appearing out of the sediment. Things like drinking vessels, sheets of birch bark engraved with peacock and chimera to keep the horn inlays of the crossbows dry. Leather bags of strange floating red powder, saffron, worth more than gold at that time because in 1495 to get that saffron to Denmark, it had to travel overland on the spice road. So really quite amazing things encapsulated. And the picture on the left is the old school method of laying out a grid over a site and systematically working each square of the grid. And this was on the wreck of a B-24 heavy bomber off of Croatia, so a much more modern site that we'll come to shortly later in the talk. Train, practice, and grow. This really expands on what I was talking about yesterday in my 4-minute talk. Practice, practice, practice. You saw this picture yesterday. I'm in the orange helmet in some rather unorthodox, very early trimix equipment. We've been to 100 meters in this flooded slate quarry with my team, but the equipment configuration, which I'm quite embarrassed about, sorry Jared, of what I was diving in at that time, is basically everything we could beg, borrow, or steal from the dive center I worked at. So there's a 5 litre, there's a 7 litre, there's a couple of 12 litres, there's 2 12 litres on the back, all on a standard recreational BCD in a 7mm neoprene dry suit, which on the surface required loads of lead to sink it, and on the bottom was the thickness of paper. So a way I wouldn't dream of diving now, but it was beginnings. And the important part about it was that we were already thinking about risk management, risk mitigation, redundancy, backup, backup, backup. And by that method, our team managed to excavate quite a lot of virgin wrecks. Lee Bishop, who spoke to us yesterday, is going to speak to us later today, took that on to his passion, exploring wrecks. This early team from the early 90s, 3 of us there, the second group of trimix trained students in the UK. We managed to find the bell and numerous artifacts from this triple-masted sailing ship, the Waitara. Here's my inspiration, Steve Axtell. Now, what I didn't mention yesterday when you saw this photo is the little slate he's carrying has got 50 written on it. And it was very interesting in my evolution as a diver. Steve and I had dived together for 18 months. I was now working for him as an instructor. We planned and executed our first 50-meter dive, which was in Voodoo Land off the edge of Paddy Tables. So we found appropriate tables, we built redundant equipment, we had an extra cylinder of gas, an extra regulator, and we did this wreck on a ship that had sunk by hitting the island and sinking. So you go to 50 meters on the bow and then come all the way up the wreck to decompress on the propeller right up on the island at 6 meters. So a magical moment for us. He inspired me, and I took that over 30 years of teaching to inspiring my own students. And this is me teaching cave in France, where I believed that it was important not just to get people in the water and do wet drills and just teach them how to cave dive, but to take them to dry caves and teach them about the cave, the geology, the environment. In Florida, there's a place where you can swim along a tunnel that is a rock tunnel, it's a cave, but as you turn the corner, there's a row of whale vertebrae in the floor. This was a seabed millions of years ago, so a truly inspirational environment that people should understand. I like to feel that I've tried most types of diving, and that's evolved into where I am now with my career. Probably the most fun ever was the C.B. Gorman standard dress, where the air is pumped to you by a wheel pump. You can hear it. You match your breathing to the air coming from the pump by hand. It's like you're diving in a creature. It keeps inflating, you get more buoyant. You can then take a giant leap and fly through the air over an obstacle like an astronaut. And then the dump valve, instead of on your shoulder, is inside the helmet. You hit it with your head to sink back down. That equipment weighs more than I do, significantly so. So it's cumbersome on land and then light in the water. The helmet in the middle at the top is the Kirby Morgan Super Light. It's not super light, it's not super comfortable. It's like looking through binoculars. But it was called the Super Light because the original version, fiberglass, later versions in this glorious dive site here of zero visibility, stainless steel, is super light compared to standard dress, where it evolved from. The job here, I did my commercial training. I wanted another string to my bow. I've always seen diving as a tree trunk. At the top are numerous branches. You can progress and become an expert or very experienced in one. What you can't do is then jump across to the tip of other branches. You go back to the trunk, which is the core of what we all do diving, and you learn the new skill set. So after I went to commercial dive school, I did it backwards. I had somewhere like 6,000 dives in control of myself, technical diving. Went to dive school where they took away my computers and says, you're not allowed to know where you are, the supervisor does that. We'll lower you down until we say stop, we'll pull you up until we say stop. It's very disorientating to be on a deep dive with no knowledge of how long your deco is. On this dive, actually, I found a Deliveroo box and explained to the supervisor, I found a Deliveroo box. He said, is it on the moped? No. Well, what's in it? Is it Kentucky Fried Chicken? Is it Burger King? So, pretty awful conditions, but those of you at the dinner last night, at least I'm not diving in chicken. And then you go to Buzz Lightyear. I am a self-confessed uber fan of Iron Man. My first dive in the exosuit before they put the faceplate on, I did have to say I am Iron Man. 300-meter rated. The gas supply is independent, so no gas comes down the umbilical. All the umbilical is for is the thrusters. So you imagine 4 of these wonderful Suecs, 2 on your side horizontal, 2 on your back vertical, and your foot pedals drive you forward, backward, up, down, left and right. You can lock in position against current, and you can explore sites. We use this on the Antikythera site, looking for that missing boulder, looking for that missing horse. Still out there to be found, which is one of the most intriguing things about diving. There's always something new to find, always something new to do. One of my greatest inspirations is Shackleton. I was very fortunate last Saturday to see the premiere of the Endurance movie. If you get the opportunity, go and see it. It's done by the team that made Free Solo. It's beautifully filmed in true honor to Shackleton and the Endurance. But like we were talking yesterday about Apollo 13 being a glorious failure, because although the mission failed, the team brought everyone home alive. When Endurance was crushed and sunk beneath the ice, to be found in 2022 by Menson Bound and his team, Shackleton didn't give up. He had his men tow the rowboats, the lifeboats, across the ice, launched them into sea, reach Elephant Island. He then sailed across the Southern Ocean with dead reckoning and sextant navigation to hit South Georgia on the wrong side. So he traversed the island across the mountains that had never been done before to return back to Elephant Island and rescue his entire crew. For me, the most important driving factor of expeditions, projects, missions, and even a fun dive is everyone comes home uninjured. And Shackleton exemplified that leadership. Explore the blank piece of paper, the blank map, whether that's exploring science or exploring an environment. For me, it's like the most amazing experience of my life to go to a place that no human being has been. On a budget of a normal person, caving, you can still do that. Because on a mountain, in space, in the oceans, we can send, sorry Jill, a robot, boo. In caving, you've got to go there. You've got to go around the corner. So this site here is 12 kilometers from the entrance. It's 1.2 kilometers depth of dry cave. To get to this place involves 4 camps, like climbing Everest, Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, then the summit, backwards, all the way down to the bottom of the mountain. 55 people transported disassembled rebreathers and all the support equipment to that point, to then leave and pass the first flooded section, to traverse dry cave, camp again, reach the next flooded section, lay 600 meters of line, and eventually surface in Virgin Cave. And that little smiley face there, we've got to this little bubble like the size of the back of your car, and we've gone, is this it? 45 days underground, and this is what we find? And I pull away my hood to listen to Marcin, my partner, the only other person that got through the sump, what he's trying to say to me, and all I can hear is a roar like a train going through a tunnel. It's the waterfall, and what we're looking for is descent. We want to go deeper into the earth, follow the journey of the river through the mountain to where it comes out. And that's all we could hear. So getting out of the gear and squeezing through a little gap was this huge waterfall which we were able to explore and continue. My current project is also exploration. Now this is an interesting one, and Lee will cover this much more detail in his talk this afternoon. If you go on a wreck or in a mine, is it exploration because somebody built the wreck, somebody dug the mine? It most definitely is, because what's there has been forgotten. The people on it have been lost or are still there. So you're exploring history. This door is at the bottom of an elevator shaft where the miners would go to work. Delivered by elevator, this door is at 130 meters of depth, half a kilometer into the mine. Much like Stefan's talk yesterday, the most amazing thing about this was the guy in the village who walks his dog every day had become friends with us. He'd come and have coffee. We told him we'd found the door. He said, no, you can't. It's way too deep. It took like 10 minutes to get to work, and now it's flooded. We showed him the video, and he literally burst into tears, and he sat with us. He went to this door, signed in with the supervisor, got the tools that he was issued, and then went off to his work in the train line beyond it that goes out to the far reaches of the mine. We're now at 160 meter level in the mine, hence the MOD on those bottles, and continuing to explore. But evolution, as Jared was talking about, we're now using free habitats to enable us to do the decompression from those dives. The last habitat being CO2 scrubber and oxygen replenishment capable, so we can get out of the equipment, eat, drink, and even watch movies. Using vulcanized rubber dry suits with dry hoods, dry mittens, multiple heating systems to give redundancy. That dive involved each diver wearing 2 20-liter steel bailouts and 15 additional S80s throughout the mine of redundancy in case the rebreather were to fail. So the next step is obviously something more logistically feasible, such as bailout rebreather. I think one of the most rewarding things for me was to give something back. I've done that in 2 ways, giving it back to my students in educating them and helping them with their journey. And on this stone in the corner here, you see Vinu Ernest. This is Ernest Vinu. Ernest Vinu was killed over Romania on the bombing run in this B-17. Flak went through the bottom of the aircraft and killed him outright. The crew lifted him from the co-pilot's seat, carried him down and laid him on the wooden crawlway to the bombardier's compartment. And then the hydraulics failed, flying over the island of Vis, which was neutral, and they ditched into the sea. All the other 9 crew members got out into the life rafts and made it to shore, but Ernest, already being deceased, went down with the aircraft. It's at 70 meters of depth. It's probably the most intact aircraft wreck that I've ever dived, but the 6 weeks of the project involved penetrating this hole in the front of the aircraft, swimming under the bombardier's floor, past the cockpit and under the top turret to use those dredges to sift out the sediment, capture every piece of sediment to then wet sieve it on the surface all afternoon after each dive and recover Ernest Vignew. He went back to America for an Arlington military ceremony, got a red star on his name on the memorial, and his family got him for burial. Some of the most rewarding and worthwhile work I've ever been privileged to be involved with. But, as was said yesterday in the Explorers panel, fellows. Some of these people are no longer with us, but their memory lives with me every day. They're very special people I did some incredible things with. Lee was talking about Carl Spencer yesterday. This is Carl and myself on our saturation diving course in Fort William in a closed bell. Mitsu was my friend that I trained and then helped train the Japanese Coast Guard on the island of Oshima, just off of Tokyo, a phenomenal diver. This is the three of us at the end of the J2 project at Camp 4 in some rather fetching underwear that's actually impregnated with silver and copper to stop infection. If you live in a muddy hole in the ground for 45 days, infection's a big thing. This stuff was amazing. And the middle photo is my greatest friend, sat at the back there hiding, Sammy. The three of us in Norway, Sammy, myself and Tony. And I have a little bit of a secret, bit of a bad boy story to tell you of this. I was support, so I carried all Sammy's gear to the flooded section, down through the cave. We got to the flooded section, he kitted up in proper cave diving equipment, primary gas, secondary gas, roll of thirds, everything. He set off into the virgin sump. Some 5 minutes later he came back and said, "It's only 10 meters long and there's dry cave beyond." So I was dressed a bit like this, but with a helmet. I just took one of his cylinders and kind of swum through the sump in my clothes, with no mask. And one tank. And we explored the dry section and we kind of got to the next sump and realized that was enough for that trip. But this is an ongoing project that Sammy and his team have continued to explore. And, you know, really, the darkness beckons. I'm nearly there. So this is Cousteau's Congeal 2. It's a starfish. They lived in it. What I love about this is living in a habitat to dive and explore the ocean with red wine and cigarettes. That's how it used to be done. That's then. I kind of fancy the red wine. That sounds pretty good. They even had a parrot in the habitat. And Cousteau said, they're going, "This parrot is observing the parrotfish. I wonder what they are thinking." It's really, truly amazing. Now, these are the habitats we built and use in Langban Mine. From 160 meters, we're looking now at 7-hour run time, 6 hours of decompression. The big one has actually got 3 of us inside of it. Our gear outside, because we've built a scrubber, a fan system, and a sonic jet to basically replenish the oxygen and remove the CO2. So I actually beat my employer to a working habitat. It's baby deep. Where am I going? Kirk showed you Vanguard yesterday, our 3-man, 100-meter capable habitat. What we aim to do is make these habitats available for normal scientists, not helmet-wearing professional divers. And the way we are going to do that is we're going to reverse the norm. This is a concept photo. The photo is real. Sammy took it on the wreck of the Karlsruhe at 96 meters in the Baltic Sea. What I've added is the umbilical, because our aim is to use full face mask with a switcher block, so you dive the rebreather and bail out to the umbilical should the rebreather fail. The exact reverse of the norm in the oil and gas industry. Sorry if I run over a little bit, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil.